everybody. I'm very excited to be joined today by Matt Fleming, the Managing Director of Vagabond Wines. Matt, thank you so much for making the time to do this.
It's a pleasure, Rob.
So Matt, I'm going to get into cringeworthily questioning you and your operating philosophy in a second, but just so that people know who I'm talking to today, would you mind just explaining a bit about Vagabond Wines for folks that haven't had the pleasure of coming to one of your places yet?
Certainly. Vagabond Wines, we are a now 10-strong wine bar business. We have 9 sites in London, and we've just opened our 10th site in Birmingham. And our key USPs really are that we have 100 plus wines by the glass, which is also one of the most diverse wine lists possibly in the world. The way we buy wine is quite unique, and the menu changes constantly and is different from store to store as well. We use a type of wine dispenser which allows you to have a 50 ml sample of any of the wines before you kind of, lean into buying a full bottle of it and risk that kind of money. So, there's a lot of opportunity for kind of new adventure and experience in finding some new wines.
Yeah, I'm a regular customer of your Shoreditch sort of Liverpool Street location. And I love it that it can make a cretin like me sort of feel comfortable in a high-end wine establishment. That's a pretty unusual proposition.
I mean, it is part of the point. One of the kind of founding principles of the business when Stephen started it in 2010 was because in London at that point, it was quite difficult to get high-end, really interesting wines from anywhere outside of kind of a red-trousered wine shop establishment where, you might feel quite intimidated. So yeah, we hope we offer a bit of a less intimidating service than that now. I didn't feel intimidated by you, mainly just the guests that I invited that were very excited to come to Vagabond Wines, but your colleagues in the location definitely made me feel at home. So do you come from a red-trousered wine background, Matt? What was your induction into the sector, and how did you end up at Vagabond Wines? I mean, my original induction into the sector was many, many years ago. It was an O'Neill's in Harborne in Birmingham. Fresh out of school, as soon as I was allowed to work behind a bar, and there was this old pub called the Junction, which was turning into an O'Neill's near me, and I was like, I absolutely have to work in that bar. I thought working behind the bar in O'Neill's was the coolest thing on the planet, essentially. Basically that kind of passion for it continued throughout traveling, throughout university. I was running restaurants and bars whilst still doing my degree. And then when I finished, I did a few more years living in Oxford and running establishments there before coming to London, working for Soho House, working for a few other kind of a real assortment of different types of venues for a few years before then running my own business. Took the step of opening a bar on Upper Street in Islington back in 2012. And yeah, that was a wild few years. At the end of 2014. And then I went and worked for a grown-up business again that knew what they were doing. And that was At One. And I spent a good number of years at At One, working the ops team there before the business was sold to Stonegate. And then I jumped to Stonegate and I spent a couple of years there, or 18 months there. Unfortunately, a massive chunk of that period of time was during the coronavirus pandemic. So I was on furlough for a good amount of it before finally joining Vagabond in January of last year.
Amazing. So excluding Vagabond, because we can't have too many puff pieces on this series, what is the best operational environment that you've ever worked in, and what made that environment so great? And
I can't just say my own business, right? No.
Sadly not.
I mean, it's absolutely the opposite of my own business. The difference in how things are done when I moved from running my own business, which was, we had a bar, we had a country pub, and we had a nightclub in Brighton. It was a really diverse, strange little group. But the difference of when I went to interview even for At One, and I remember I went to the Spitalfields site, I was chatting to the bartender about, what do you think of working for At One? And the guy behind the bar was like, I absolutely love this company. This company is fantastic. I love working here. We have the best time with the best people. We're the best. And I was just blown away. I was basically like, what would have happened if I'd have not knowing who I was, asked one of my team 6 months ago that honest question over the bar? Would they have said the same thing? And would they have, felt that passion for the business that they were operating? And I knew the answer. I knew the answer was no, unfortunately. And I was like, right, I really need to know how these guys are doing this. So I actually went into that business. I hope, Andrew Stones doesn't mind me saying when he interviewed me, fully intending to just learn everything that they were doing, rip it all off, and go and open another bar myself. That was the entire plan for joining there.
Am I right in understanding that it was a core part of the Be At One recruitment strategy to get people that basically wanted to be hospitality entrepreneurs? They weren't really looking for people that wanted to be employees.
I mean, everything that was done in that business, which, you know, is something that I think every business wants, was bring people up from the bottom, bring people up from within. I mean, the stats escape me right now, but the percentage of general managers who had started as, you know, bartenders in their first ever bar job, who really didn't know a great deal when they started on day one, who'd gone right through that process to running their own bar, was ridiculously high. I mean, it was something like 60-70% at the point that we sold the business. And yeah, it was because of this complete commitment to training. You know, training and standards was absolutely everything in that business. And the pride that every member of the team took in kind of like being the best was really kind of what set it apart. And that's why people kind of wanted to move up the ladder. They wanted to run a Be At One bar in that environment.
Do you know where that came from? Like, how did they arrive at that operating philosophy? Because that is, it sounds simple, but it's immensely powerful and actually quite unusual, isn't it?
Yeah, it is. I think that the standards piece, I mean, look, there is a lot of children and grandchildren of TGI Fridays in terms of businesses out there in the world. And it's no secret that Be At One is one of those children. The three boys who founded it, they worked together at TGI's. They took some of the principles of that TGI's of that era in the early to mid 90s, and they kind of added their own slight spin on it and made it their own. But they were absolutely military about standards right from the beginning. So from that perspective, it started there. It maybe took a few more years of refinement for us to add in some of the more kind of, you know, operational elements that brought people through, really developed people, really gave people core transferable skills. And, you know, it hit a peak of all of that really right before it was bought by Stonegate. You know, the year that Stonegate bought Be At One, we were in 14% like-for-like growth in like the 19th or 20th year of its existence, which is just crazy. And that's, you know, the work that was done there was absolutely fantastic. I know I reference it all the time at work with everybody, and I'm sure everybody is absolutely sick of me talking about Be At One, because we do use it as a you know, as a bit of a kind of like a lighthouse of what I think the right way to do things is.
It's amazing. Yeah, I find it really inspiring to hear about. I'm assuming that you left Be At One a different person, or at least a different professional to the guy that joined. What would you say are some of the biggest learning moments from your operating career so far?
I mean, some of the really biggest learning moments were running your own business, running your own hospitality business. So even before getting to Be At One, like there's something that happens when it is your money that's being spent on absolutely every little detail in the business. You know, it focuses the mind quite amazingly to make you really kind of cost focused and value focused. And are we getting every, you know, ounce of bang for buck out of this pound? So I mean, that's a big one. And Be At One, it was you know, it was kind of constant. There was learned an enormous amount there about what it means to be in a growth business, and you know how to kind of really focus on consistency across a larger number of bars. And then, you know, I went to Stonegate afterwards, an absolute behemoth. It was, you know, just before the EI acquisition, but, you know, still 800 bars and 18,000 employees. And whilst that environment wasn't my favorite kind of size of business to be working in, I like to do things like a little bit smaller. You know, some of the learnings just, you know, from pure commerciality in that business, amongst many other things, was, you know, there was a lot there as well. So I think you take learnings from wherever you are, like whatever business you're in, whatever size, whatever kind of type of thing you're doing, you've got to kind of find the best people in it and grab what you can from them and from it.
So I'm going to confess that you and I have trained in the same gym. So I know you a little bit from sort of outside of work, outside of the hospitality sector. Two things I know about you is that you are like crazy committed when it comes to like delivering a goal. Quite detail oriented. So like I feel like your little brother. I feel like Danny DeVito in Twins, trying to keep up with you in most of the things that we do in our personal lives. Did you have that before you joined the sector, or did some of that come through the work experiences that you had?
Which bit? The detail?
Yeah, the detail and the competitive drive. Is that innate to you? And do you think that that's important in somebody that goes through the sort of operations track and ends up running a hospitality business, or not?
Honestly, I think that a lot of that is, that's upbringing, and that's personality, and that's stuff that's got to be in you at the beginning. And if you want to be moving up and you want to be, you want to be running places and successfully, I think you need a bit of that kind of like intrinsically. But, you also need the ability, as I said before, to learn from everybody who you're working with, and to admit when you're wrong, and admit when there's a better way of doing things, and kind of take the best point of view in the room and go with that.
And where would you say was the place that you learned that the most then? Like, I mean, I guess that'd be at One again, when you come in having been the boss and then having to sort of submit to the will of the organization and the group.
I mean, yeah, but there wasn't much submit to the will of the organization and the group in that environment. Some of the best times I think I've, had working in that business were sitting in a boardroom with, the other ops guys, and just arguing constructively about what we needed to sort out, and then leaving the room with the best solution for it, and knowing that you got your point across, and the best point had won, and that you were going to support it. That's definitely something that we did really well there. And it was it's a piece that we try and do still today. I think we did a management workshop with my leadership team just recently on that exact thing, trying to make sure that we have the trust in our team to be able to have that conflict without really taking it personally.
Yeah, it totally makes sense. So I have everybody talks about culture all the time at the moment, but like one of the things I've noticed is that when you talk to real hospitality people, particularly successful hospitality people that have been in the industry for a long time, there's like a greater than 50% chance that when you talk about values and culture, the person you're talking to is going to roll their eyes. And I think that's because the narrative has been slightly hijacked by folks that maybe have never owned a commercial KPI and find it very easy to sort of offer cultural advice whilst being sort of sheltered from the reality of managing a P&L. One of the things I found really interesting and effective, and it's something we've been doing all the way through this series, is to ask people what their anti-values are. Because folks that are uncomfortable with positively described values often find it quite easy to describe what their anti-values are. My guess is because of the nature of Vagabond, you probably do have a set of positive cultural values, but just humour me.
Yeah.
For you, Matt Fleming, do you know what your anti-values are? Like what the behaviours and characteristics that just wouldn't stand on one of your teams might be?
I mean, not defined in like a chart like our values are with, 4 headings and distinct behaviours beneath them. But there was just some basic ones that you really want to see, you really want people to avoid, which is, don't avoid being accountable is really important to me and to the business. If you are in a position where you are leading a team, even whatever level that is at, be fully accountable for every single thing that touches that team. So the shirking of accountability, blaming others and coming up with problems without, realistic, reasonable solutions at least.
I was going to ask you what that looks like. What does that look like in practice when somebody fails to take accountability, man? Like in hospitality generally, like don't give any names. What would be a couple of scenarios where you've typically seen that?
I mean, it's always, it's usually a blame game. It's usually something's gone wrong and no one's willing to say, oh, actually, this is probably my fault. And I mean, it's all linked into, I mean, many people watching this will have read Extreme Ownership by Jocko Willink and Leif Babin. It's one of my 2 favorite management books. And it's essentially all around the fact that if you take accountability for everything, i.e. if someone in your team does something wrong, it's your fault, because you either haven't communicated it effectively, you haven't ensured that has landed, you haven't set the right parameters for it to be done. There will always be a reason. But even if it's not so much about the fact that, oh, whose fault is it? And that's important. It's about the attitude of being fully accountable for everything within that team or within that business. And once you start to do that, it starts to shape the culture of that team, and other people start to take accountability for things naturally. It's actually Chris Lincoln, who we've hired as our head of people. He's kind of woven this along with Jason in our people department. They've spent most of the last 12 months building day one right through to running a Vagabond in a really detailed series of training books. And the management one touches on this massively. I just don't think you're going to get very far if you're always looking for whose fault something is, and you're not willing to just accept that actually this is my business. You know, if it comes back to the learnings of running your own business, there's no one to blame when it's just you and something's gone wrong. And I mean, everything will go wrong. It's, you know, that Murphy's Law is real. After enough time with enough people drinking, everything that can possibly go wrong is going to happen.
That's amazing. Yeah, it completely makes sense as well, actually. So you mentioned some of the team there. It's very clear that actually you've got a cool brand that you're presiding over, and you can imagine that it's well positioned for growth going forward. How would you sort of describe the operating strategy for the year or the years ahead?
So really, it's building on from last year. 2021 was a very strange year for the business. It was a strange year to take over a business. Certainly, we were essentially an e-commerce business in the January when I took over. But we've put a lot of foundations in place for real growth in 2022 over the course of the year. You know, we've built out this really kind of in-depth training program, which takes you right from day one through to running one of our bars. We've kind of completely redone how we recruit people, how we bring them into the business, how we retain people, what our benefits suite looks like, all of those things. And then we've also managed to, whilst doing all that, open a couple of bars. We opened Shoreditch back in May, and then we managed to open our first site outside of London in Birmingham, right in the centre at the beginning of November last year. So now we hit 2022, you know, after the little hiccup that was the horrendous December and Omicron section, we find ourselves in a position where we have a fair bit to do this year. We've got a lot on. We first and foremost have to open Heathrow. So we have a site airside at Terminal 5 at Heathrow, which we've been working on for a very long time, but it is due to open this May. That's a real big one. It's a really complex environment to do an opening in. I don't know if anybody who's ever worked in the airport environment will testify that it's just so tough. The amount of detail, the amount of compliance is, as you'd expect, really high. But it means that's such an important one for us to land. It's also, you know, it's Vagabond on the world stage slightly. There's 33 million people a year coming through that terminal, and they're all going to see your brand and have some sort of an interaction with it. So we absolutely have to smash that out of the water. Outside of that, we've got some fun digital stuff happening. Firstly, Vagabond Som subscription. We are launching the only truly personalized wine subscription worldwide, or at least, you know, as far as we're aware. It's 5 100ml bottles of wine that are ever more tailored to your tastes through your interactions with the app, as and when you get them and you like the ones that you're really into, and you do a thumbs down for the ones you don't. That is in beta at the moment. It's been in beta for about 3 months, and it launches, I think, on the 21st or 22nd of this month. That's going to be big for us. It links into the app, which is something we've had. We launched it before I joined the business. It was first launched in the middle of 2020 during the pandemic. And, you know, one of the key features of it is the tap and pour functionality, which is that you can pour a glass of wine directly from your phone. You know, the idea of it is that it's about making it easier for the customer, but the benefit of it, quite honestly, is it gives us a really good amount of data that we can use for kind of making sure that we're delivering the best experiences to our guests, because we know what they like, we know what they don't like, and it enables that bespoke guest journey. And then, you know, it links into subscription. We can engage with them across all platforms with offers, incentives, experiences, and that really is kind of the future of the business, this omni-channel environment where we have the app at its center. So outside of those few things, the rest of what we need to do this year is around growth. We've got some really good pipeline sites planned. We're looking actively for sites. We're looking to still spread our wings further outside of London and do a lot more than that. So yeah, it's going to be a very busy 2022, I think.
I mean, this concept of making wine accessible but doing it in a cool, classy way is compelling. I'm fascinated in the people development side of the operating strategy, because I would imagine that given how tight the labour market is, I'm guessing that you just can't go and recruit master sommeliers everywhere you look. Like, can you just talk us through a little bit more about how you're thinking about getting the right people on the bus? Because I would guess that it's hard for everyone right now, but it must be extraordinarily hard for you, given how important product understanding is and passion.
I mean, it absolutely would be. And that's why this training program is in place. You know, we want to get to a place where it is fully hire for personality and train the skill. And we're close. You know, the wine training that we have in place now is pretty solid. Sorry, there's a massive lorry going past my window. I don't know whether you can hear that.
Yeah, we couldn't, but it's all right. It's keeping it earthy and real, Matt.
The training program really there are 4 levels to it. And you start as a trainee crew, then you go to Village, you go to Premier Crew, you go to Grand Cru. Those Grand Cru wine advisors are the full ambassador for the business. They are trained in pairing, wine with food. They know all about spoilers of wine, and they know a really, really good amount about our core range. In addition to that, we partner with the WSET. We are, we're a provider of WSET courses, and every single one of us that joins the business has the opportunity to do WSET level 1, and if they stay for 3 months, WSET level 2. So we're leaning on that for wine training and also the programs that we put in place. We wouldn't. There's no way we'd be able to survive if we were just looking for people with WSET 2, 3, or above. They're just not out there. I think everybody's suffering in the recruitment market. It's really, really tough out there. What we've noticed is, we had a really good surge and some really, really solid recruitment that was great. It's got more challenging again post-Christmas as more places have opened up and trade has really, really started to bounce back well. But, some of the positives are that our retention is really, really solid now. So it speaks to some of the things we're doing, seem to be working well for keeping people on board and moving them through the stages. So we're still going to need to pull them in as everybody else is, and we're having another look. Even though we did so much work on it last year, we're having another look at all of our recruitment processes, how we talk about the business as far as people coming into it are concerned. The youth of today, to use a horrible phrase, are not concerned with just getting a job and coming in and punching a clock and earning minimum wage or London living wage. They want to work for something they believe in, and they want to be part of a movement, and they want all the things that come along with that. So, that's kind of what we've always been, is a bit of a disruptor to the larger wine world. And it's really about just making sure that we're really clear on that in our advertising for recruits and everything else.
Yeah, that's very cool. And it makes sense. One of the things that's coming up again and again now in the sector, I think, is join a business that has something genuinely authentically special about it, because if you don't have that as a starting position, you're actually going to struggle with a lot of the strategic pillars that are required to make you successful. Like, it strikes me as an incredibly difficult challenge to do recruitment well if you don't actually have something cool to sell to recruits.
Certainly. Yeah, it does indeed.
Matt, now you have been in your post long enough to be obviously well entrenched, but recently enough to be able to perhaps relate to folks in the sector that either have already or soon will be joining new businesses. There's been a tremendous turnover, as we know, in the sector. Do you have any top tips for business leaders that have an operational bias or background in terms of setting first priorities when they go into a new place?
At the risk of keeping it too short, people, any business that isn't investing in their people and listening to their people is going to really struggle. We've just spoken about recruitment, some of the challenges that are in and around there, but also having just engaged members of the team that are going to represent your brand in the way that you want and give your guests the experience that you want. You have to be thinking about your employees as your number one priority. Unfortunately, and I'm sure any of my investors watching won't love this, but you've got to put them first. It's people first. People, customers, and investors is probably the best way of thinking about it.
Well, I think there's a growing body of work, right? Understanding that sort of profit chain, and that it does actually start with the employees that then deliver the experience that the customers pay for.
Yeah, that's Danny Mayer setting the table stuff. It's been around for a very long time, but to actually practice it and do it is quite difficult.
Well, I think all of us that are watching are going to enjoy sort of seeing Vagabond's journey over the coming years. I think all of us are tired of the sort of news of struggle over the last couple of years. So I think watching you guys set the pace in terms of an integrated physical experience with the e-com, with a brand, making a product that's potentially quite intimidating, accessible. I can't imagine there's anyone watching this that won't wish you luck. That's certainly how I feel. So Matt, thank you for being so generous for your time and your insights. If people are interested in the roles that are opening up at Vagabond, both frontline and at the top of the business, what's the best way to find out about you? I suppose just Google Vagabond, right?
You can Google Vagabond. It's on our website, on our careers page. It's on our LinkedIn. It's like everybody else. Recruitment is absolutely everywhere, front and center on all of our platforms. So yeah, you can find it absolutely anywhere. And yeah, we're looking for people who kind of want a career in wine, not just people who want a job. So yeah, if that's you, do get in touch.
Fantastic. And they will talk about life at Vagabond the way that guy once did about life at Bit One, right?
That's the plan, yeah.
Matt Fleming, thank you so much. This has been fantastic.
Cheers, Rob. Thanks, mate.